You have finally done it. The climax of Super Mario Bros. Is before you. After 7 fake Bowsers and constantly being yeeted by your princess is in another castle, you set your eyes on the now freed Toadstool. Your prize for persevering through these troubles is a thank you, a kiss on the cheek, and the promise of a new adventure. An even more difficult quest. Wow. Let's take a moment to put this simple message into context. The launch of the Nintendo Entertainment System saw games that still had a point-driven arcade-style gameplay structure, or at the very least, something relatively as basic in their premise. Mario Bros., while also being straightforward with its gameplay, was a bit different. It was one of the first games to actually feel as though you were embarking on something far greater than just shooting ducks from the sky or eating pellets in a maze. Across the 32 action-packed stages, there came an evolution to the meaning of what a video game could be. So you're telling me at the end of this already meaty package, the devs have blessed us with an entirely new quest to romp through? That is just awesome. Yeah, actually, this kinda sucks. If it was not incredibly obvious from the first couple of seconds of footage, this post-game content may be a little recycled from what you just got done playing. It's pretty much just the hard mode of the same game, which includes a few differences sprinkled in to really up the ante, such as all of the Goombas being replaced by buzzy beetles, the elevated platforms are a bit smaller, the enemies walk faster, and fire bars appear in all possible locations. Yeah, whatever that means. Do you get anything special for replaying virtually the same game but with a little hint of tangy pinch to it? No, you get absolutely nothing. Look, I'm not trying to roast the devs right now because, like I said, the base game by itself is still impressive, especially for it being one of the first of its kind. So they didn't even have to include the second quest, and hey, I suppose it does live up to what it's called, with it just being a more difficult version of the same game. Unless you're playing the NES version, in which it calls it a new quest. Again, yeah, you could call it that, I suppose, but if you're wanting a more challenging version of the original Mario Bros., well boy, do I have the game for you.
Mario Bros. 2, but not the USA Mario Bros. 2. Actually, never mind trying to explain, this must be extremely overdone and tedious at this point. Go watch The Gaming Historian about Mario 2. It's literally his most popular video.
By the way, I fully intended to keep this aesthetic of recording directly off of a CRT going until I realized that my file for the lost levels that had quick access to the post-game was on the Switch's SNES thingy, and I didn't feel like replaying the game on my All-Stars cart, so you'll be forced to look at this generic, high-quality bordered gameplay. What a shame. I heard that CRTs are totally cool and retro nowadays. It's funny how old stuff becomes cool again, and yes, you may be wondering why I have a giant chunk of my PVM missing. I'm just gonna say, if you only take one thing away from this video, it's to never buy one of these things online and have it shipped to you. You are going to have a bad time. Another takeaway is to remember that nothing about Mario Bros. 2 could ever be straightforward and simple to understand, especially not the post-game content. Say what you will about the main game of the Lost Levels, it's too hard, it's too similar, blah blah blah. Who knows if that's actually true, and it's not like anybody has ever made a video talking about it. However, one thing is a fact, and that is once you have slain Bowser in 8-4 and pieces paved, you are met with the same exact message from the original. Except this time, that promise of a more difficult quest isn't anything to put an asterisk disclaimer by. Nope, you are indeed on the cusp of a small, wacky adventure. But of course, it's not as cut and dry as you'd maybe expect. Depending on which version of the Lost Levels you're playing, it can somewhat alter how you even go about accessing these extra stages. So excuse me while I throw a bit of a Wikipedia article dump onto you momentarily. Now, as far as I am concerned, there are 3 different versions of the Lost Levels that each have their own tweaks and alterations throughout the entirety of the game. The Famicom original, the Super Nintendo remake, and the Game Boy Color port. Oddly enough, no other area are these changes more prevalent than the post-game content. Which, to go ahead and clarify and elaborate further on, is composed of 2 sets of extra levels. World 9 and Worlds A, B, C, and D. I guess Worlds 10, 11, 12, and 13 sounded too tacky. Let me go ahead and address the most lackluster version being from Mario Deluxe. I haven't actually ever played this Game Boy Color port of the original and Lost Levels combo pack myself, but I do find the Mario Wiki's usage of the word enhanced a little debatable. Listen, it might just be me, but I don't think there's anything enhanced about that screen crunch. Jesus Christ. Deluxe was novel for a good portion of time when it came out, with it being the only way to play either game portably for about 4 to 5 years until it got outclassed, at least in terms of the main gameplay, when the Game Boy Advance ports hit the scene. Not to mention it being plunged furthermore into obscurity nowadays when you can play either of the other two clearly superior versions of the games in their original forms on the Switch. Yikes. But hey, Deluxe has these exclusive cool looking achievements. Alright, on to talking about the post-game. Oh wait, whoopsies, actually it's straight up non-existent. Whether it was due to limited dev time or not enough space on the cartridge, the entirety of Worlds 9 through D are not accessible, at least not through normal means. With the usage of we can load them back into the game since the levels themselves are partially there within the code, having varying levels of completion done for each. Stuff like missing enemies and messed up flagpoles leaves these stages mostly unbeatable, which in turn makes the Lost Levels side of Deluxe feel like an incomplete package, which, in a sense, it is exactly that. I'm not gonna say this game sucks, but you would not catch me actively playing it while enjoying myself. Going back to the Famicom Disk Drive original, thankfully we do not have to worry about any cut content. But there are some other quite concerning things going about. As I established earlier, the Lost Levels follows the same gameplay beats as the original, with you going through 32 levels, beating Bowser in World 8, and then saving the princess to be met with a new quest. Instead of it being a boring and lame hard mode, if the player has gone through the entire game without using a warp zone, they get to go past what was thought possible. They get to play through World 9, the fantasy world, as they oddly called it. The sometimes sadistic nature of this game comes out in full force here, and the devs don't even try to be sneaky with it. The prime example is, it doesn't matter how many lives you beat 8-4 with, in this 9 world, you only get 1 life. Not to spoil the contents too heavily yet, but I would say World 9 isn't quite as hard as nearing the end of the Lost Levels main stages. Regardless, it puts an unnecessary anxiety onto the players in this time of supposed joyful wonder. If you mess up a single time, you get booted all the way back to World 1, but not before getting called a super player by Mario himself. They hope to see you again, and well, see you again they will, assuming you want to play through Worlds A, B, C, and D. Oh, but they won't just see you once, not twice, not even 3 times. More like you have to beat the game 8 consecutive times to gain access to the last 4 worlds of the game. Who thought this was okay? Was Miyamoto and the other devs just laughing their asses off watching poor little Hinata develop anger issues? It's over 30 years later, and I still say don't give them the satisfaction of wasting your time trying to beat the game that many times just for a little post-game content. And no, I'm not saying just use an emulator to cheat your way there, for we have a savior in the form of Mario All-Stars. I suppose the devs mellowed out a little bit by the time they programmed the Lost Levels part of All-Stars, because actually being able to play through the post-game, more specifically the lettered worlds, don't make you want to question your existence. Now, getting to World 9 still requires the non-usage of any warp zone, which is more than a reasonable request for what is essentially an end-of-game bonus. Plus, you get to keep any of the extra lives you had when beating the main game. How nice of them. What has changed, and what solidifies this version of the game as the apex of Lost Levels, even putting aside the graphical differences, is that no longer do you have to mind-numbingly slog through the same game 8 times, but rather they had enough sense to just let you start World A right after you beat World 9. When I replayed the Lost Levels recently, I honestly didn't even know anything past World 9 was there, so it acted as an even greater treat that if I were playing the original version, I most definitely would have missed if it weren't for research. All of this is some fairly absurd trivia you could copy and paste to tell your friends about one random night on Discord, but what pieces it all together is the contents of these bonus worlds themselves. I have been a little shy with showing gameplay of it, so what exactly makes these levels so special? The answers may surprise you. So, World 9, does it live up to the hype? I mean, it is called the fantasy world after all. What kind of insane level design trickery do the devs have up their sleeves? There's going to be so many insane jumps, and the enemy placements are going to be, water level. Well, we still have the rest of the world to play through, I'm sure that, there's another one. And, another one. Yay. I think underwater stages are universally seen as something game devs are seemingly held at gunpoint to include within their platformers, even though nobody actually likes playing through them. So for World 9 to be composed of 75% water levels, it's not really the grand adventure I would live out in my Mario fantasy. For greater context, if we take the entirety of the main courses within the Lost Levels, we can see that it only contains 2 water stages. Yes, there are less water stages from worlds 1 to 8 than there are in the single 9th world. My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined. Hold on now, something's a little off about these levels. What kind of things would you normally expect from a totally normal water stage? Bloopers, cheap cheeps, the occasional Koopa, descending platforms, piranha plants, bullet bills? Lackitudes throwing spinies, Goombas that aren't even properly shaded to match the underwater aesthetic, Buzzy Beetles, Hammer Brothers, Potaboos. Okay, what? There are some things that are maintained to help keep the universe from imploding on itself. And having all of these stage elements underwater is not one of them. I can't lie though, this wacky twist did make the initial realization that the bonus world was just a mostly underwater pain actually rather enjoyable. Just for the fact that I was never quite sure what would be thrown at me next. Which cannot totally be said about the more vanilla water levels. The funniest part of these stages is that there's no pipe to take you back onto the surface to touch the end of level flagpole. Instead, once the level is completed, Mario just kinda chills out in the castle that is fully submerged underwater. A little side note, this silly detail got me thinking that if, canonically speaking, if it's the same Mario in each game, why can he hold his breath indefinitely underwater in these 2D games? But as soon as he made the jump to 3D, his lungs started acting a bit funky. I don't know, just food for thought, I suppose. The third and last water level of World 9 isn't really even a level at all. I mean, you can still die of course, but the composition is just a special message of bricks laid out from the developers. I think it's really cool and rather sweet when devs leave actual messages to the players in this manner. But too bad it's in Japanese, so we will never know what it says, unless you speak Japanese. I wonder how many American kids reached this part in 1993 and just thought to themselves, what the hell is this, boy? Sorry, little Tommy, there was no Google Translate or Mario Wiki back in the day. Now, some of you curious cats may be wondering, why is it like this? Did they really find enjoyment in making all of these water stages? Is there a purpose to this madness? Are the devs truly the meticulous, sinister people that Mr. Robert Hughes of Nintendo Life claims them to be? Well, there actually is some backstory to all of this. According to the Mario Wiki, which accords to an interview given in the Family Computer magazine, Mr. Miyamoto added World 9 to Mario 2 after his experiences with a certain glitch, exclusive to the Family Computer disk drive version of the original Mario Bros. In the glitch, you would be transported to a non-existent world that had the overworld level theme with an underwater palette. The glitch in question would famously go on to be known as the Minus World, but it's not to be mistaken with the regular Minus World from the Famicom or NES version of the game that features a normal underwater stage that repeats itself forever. The disk system's Minus World is a lot more interesting, you could say, with floating Princess Toadstools and a Bowser that has his head cut off by the top of the screen. Yeah, nothing in the post-game of the Lost Levels is touching this in terms of weirdness. But a cool detail that was retained in the Famicom version of the Lost Levels World 9 is the Vaporwave color palette that was present in the glitched out Minus World. The graphics of World 9 were of course coded like that on purpose, since unlike the Minus World, this bonus set of levels were made for intentional usage from the players. It makes the phrasing of Fantasy World carry actual meaning instead of being some title given to hype up the player. As much as I love All Stars to death, I do have have to dunk on it just this once, for it is kinda lame how they reverted the graphics back to match the palette of a normal underwater stage in its World 9. Wow, that was quite the mouthful, and I am sure that I lost a few of you at some point in all of that, so moving on. Setting aside these quirky water levels leaves the last stage within World 9 that has my vote for the singular strangest actual stage in not only the Lost Levels, but Mario games as a franchise. 9-3 is this world's Bowser's Castle stage, which to those with a keen eye should automatically set off a red flag in your head. See, across both the original and the sequel, there's an unwritten rule that every world is topped off with the level theme of a lava-ridden castle, climaxing to a fight against some sort of Bowser on the bridge, with Mario grabbing the axe to end the stage. Although the castle level's placement within World 9 is the least of my concerns with it. Visually speaking, it is immediately apparent that it looks different from any other stage in the game, with having an overworld background theme, but with the castle interior tiles colored brown for some reason. I'm not sure why they designed it like this, perhaps to keep the wacky fantasy aspect going, but they didn't even keep the water vaporwave look, so I don't even know, man. As you start to make your way through the stage, an uneasy feeling comes over you as your expectations of any sort of obstacle is constantly being denied. If you're not counting Bowser himself, there are 0 enemies within this level, not even a single fire bar, and frankly, that is just unheard of when it comes to castle levels. Aside from feeling like an unfinished, empty husk of a stage, there are certain elements that are there that make little to no sense. For example, look at this spring that leads to absolutely nowhere. Well, I'm sorry, you can actually jump onto the top portion right here, except there's nothing up there. Okay. There is a bonus section, but given how there's hardly anything dangerous about this level, it's very easy to get to. In fact, there's 2 different passageways to it, and to add another weird little piece of trivia, it's the only bonus room that does not auto-scroll for whatever reason. Finally, you approach Bowser, who's in such an awkward position. He's right at the stairs, but he doesn't block them. It's more like he phases back and forth through them like they're not even there. Not to mention, there's no axe to drop the bridge. Well, I mean, there isn't even a bridge to begin with, but instead there's a flagpole like any other regular level. This entire stage just feels like one of those unfinished prototype things devs make to test out game mechanics and whatnot. World 9 is quite the treat, but maybe for all the wrong reasons. And that's all I gotta say about that. Even though the next part of the post-game spans over 4 worlds worth of content, I have to say that you may be a bit disappointed if you thought something even crazier than World 9 would be waiting for you. No, all of these stages for the most part just act as extra levels that could have very well been thrown in the main game with no contempt. And well, I am kinda scratching my head as to why they didn't. It is in no way a drastic jump in gameplay from the main adventure, but there is just a tiny pinch of chaotic energy to some of these stages that is quite hard to pinpoint and explain without having each set of levels fresh on your mind. It could have served to mix up the gameplay just a tad bit, especially in the first half of the main game, where it felt at times a little too similar to the original Mario Bros. As extra stages with somewhat normal designs to them, I am happy to report that they didn't decide to go overboard and crank up the difficulty to an 11 only because it's technically not a part of the core experience. In fact, besides C3, the general challenge of these stages, besides C3, is fairly relative to that of the second half of the main game, besides C3. Yeah, okay, this level single-handedly made me hate the wind mechanic with a passion. Although, I will say that World D is kind of lackluster as a final set of levels, at least compared to World 8. Not to say these levels sucked or anything, but it was just a little disappointing. Everything else though is some solid stuff that, yeah, isn't quite worth playing the game 8 times to experience, but we all know that you're playing the All-Stars version of this game anyways, so no worries about that. I'm really hoping. The real hidden gems of the bunch have to be the castle levels at the end of each of the worlds. Honestly, just a genuine fun challenge that each of them presents. The last level of the game has a way of piecing a lot of the different obstacles you've faced up until now without overdoing it. except for this super childish pipe at the very end that, if taken, boots you all the way back to the start. They just had to let out one last trollish design. I don't even blame them. That's pretty hilarious. If you're still craving a piece of weird trivia for this portion of the game, well, in this final level, there's this fake Bowser, or sometimes referred to as Bowser's brother, which, yes, is a real character with his own wiki page. I don't know why the fact that Bowser having a brother is so funny to me, but it totally is. Anyways, he's right before the actual Bowser, but you can just kinda walk under him with no problem. Or at least I did here. Like, seriously, the following camera brother is 10 times the threat this brother of Bowser is. The final battle is actually the hardest rendition of this well beyond played out scene. You are forced to take the underpath with having to concentrate on hammers being thrown, a fire bar, and Bowser jumping. For what it is, it's a pretty decent final boss. Speaking of being played out, once you have freed the princess, you are met with your kisses and thank you for a job well done. Thank you. Thank you indeed. But thank you to who? Thank you to the developers for making the post-game of the Lost Levels such a weird yet interesting piece of Mario history that is so easily forgotten when your franchise is over 35 years old. This kind of stuff is really fun to talk about, but in the end, does it really matter? No, not at all. In fact, I don't want to talk about the Lost Levels again for a very long time.
窓辺にそっと頬寄せれば遠くで滲む